Hi, my name's Penny, and today I wanted to talk about some duologies that I would recommend. So this is a prompt from the monthly recommendations group, which is a Goodreads group that I will link down below. But without further ado, let's talk about the books. So the first duology I'm going to talk about is the one that I probably recommend the most. Is that true? I'm not sure. So you're aware, I guess the order doesn't matter in this video, but I do really recommend this duology and I do want to buy a copy of this duology at some point. I generally only try to keep books that I either would want to reread or that I would want to lend to other people, and I think this duology fits into both those categories, and that is the Wolf by Wolf duology by Graudin. I don't know if that's what it's called, but there's Wolf by Wolf and Blood for Blood. Is that the name of the second one? You can see I did not prepare for this video. Basically, this is set in an alternative history where the Nazis won the war and are now ruling the world. We follow our main character who is entering a motorcycle race because the winner is going to get to meet Hitler. And her plan is that when she meets Hitler, she's going to kill him. There are also some other big surprise plot points, which it's really frustrating that you can't tell people about because it's totally a spoiler and it's better not to know that that's going to happen. But if I'd known that this kind of thing was going to be included in the book, I would have read it much more quickly. I really only read this because I picked it up on a whim. But maybe just to say there's a bit of a science fiction or fantasy element to this story. So if you like that kind of thing and you also like action, then this is a duology that I'm sure you would like. And of course, the fact that it's set in Nazi Germany, albeit an alternate Nazi Germany, means that a lot of quite deep themes get explored throughout these books. So another more recent duology that I have read is The Monsters of Verity duology by V.E. Schwab. V.E. Schwab is one of my favorite authors, and I especially like just the worlds that she creates are built on quite interesting concepts. So this world is one where whenever there's a violent act, a monster gets created, and depending on the kind of violent act, that influences what kind of monster gets created. And this series follows August, who is basically a monster fighting on one side of the city. The city is walled off, and on the other side of the city you have this guy who's basically like a mob boss, taking payments, and in return he works with the monsters to protect the people who have paid him. And his daughter Kate is another one of our main characters. So we've got August, who is a monster, he's trying to find his humanity, and we've got Kate, who really wants to live up to her father's expectations, so she's trying to essentially be a monster. I think it sets things up really well. I did feel like the pacing in the story was a little bit off, and I also know that one of the big selling points for the first book was that there was no romance, but the second book definitely went into romance territory, so don't buy into that hype. But I do really love this series. I think as well it's probably worth noting August is what's called a Sunai, so that is a monster who can essentially pull out the soul of sinners and kill them, and he does that by playing music. So that as well is like a really interesting type of monster, and it adds quite a lot, I think, to the world in general. So you've probably heard about the Monsters of Verity duology a lot because it did only come out a couple of years ago and it's had quite a lot of hype. Probably doesn't quite live up to all the hype, but it is still a good solid duology and I would recommend it. Especially if you love worlds with cool concepts. So I have two more duologies in my pile here, and they're both older duologies. So the first one people will probably know about, and that is the Power of One duology. I actually only have the sequel here, which is Tandia. My mother owns Power of One, but I really should get my own copy because it is one of my favorite books. So it's been a long time since I read the Power of One, but it basically follows this young boy named PK as he grows up into a man. and he lives in South Africa. I think also this is around wartime. Obviously, South Africa is also a country that has been influenced by war a lot. He gets into boxing. He also goes to university. He's a very intelligent man, but sometimes also quite a violent man. It's just a really good exploration of growing up in a difficult situation. Tandia follows the woman that he eventually meets, but it follows it again from her as a child. Definitely rape trigger warnings for this book, but I think that it explores kind of the impact of that on her life quite well. And both PK and Tandia really make an effort to try and change the world that they live in to make things better. And both books explore the concepts of race and prejudice in quite a realistic way, sometimes quite a gruesome way, but let's be honest, that's what it can be like, especially in South Africa. So I really love these books. The stories are just so compelling and upsetting, but the fact that they can have such an impact on your emotions, I think, is the big strength of these stories. So then the last duology I would recommend would be the Legend of Nightfall duology. So the Legend of Nightfall and the Return of Nightfall by Zucker Reichert. So these books I think are from about the 90s. They basically follow this guy called Nightfall, and he has this power to change his weight. So basically there's a whole bunch of people with these gifts. Generally it's considered kind of evil, so people try to hide their gifts, but he uses his mainly to be a bit of a criminal and cause a lot of trouble. It's actually really amazing. You don't often see that kind of idea, the fact that he can change his weight, explored, but the way that he uses that power is really creative and leads to a lot of action. At the beginning of the first book, he does end up getting caught and basically compelled to take this prince on an adventure and try to get this prince to be less of an idiot. I really enjoyed the story, and I think the sequel as well kind of takes him where he's now in more of a respectable position, but he is still kind of acting in the way he's always acted, kind of undercover. And it just takes the story further in an interesting way. So if you like fantasy, then this duology is probably one that's worth having a look at. And to be honest, I don't think I've read that many other duologies other than this. So I'm really looking forward to watching other people's videos to see what duologies they recommend. And if you have any duology recommendations for me, then please comment them down below. Because I really like science fiction and fantasy, but science fiction and fantasy tends to be all about the trilogies or the longer series, and sometimes it's a really big commitment. As you know, if you've been watching some of my previous videos, I've been making a real effort to get my series in progress down because I had like something like 30 series in progress, and it's just too much to hold in my brain. So I've been trying to get it down. I've been doing really well, but it does mean that I've been trying to avoid starting new trilogies or series. So duologies are kind of like a nice compromise in that it's not just a single standalone like Invictus, which I'm so bummed there's not any more story to it. So at least you get those two books, kind of, it's a little bit more than a standalone can give you on its own. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.